The line we have City Councillor Deon Swiggs. Good evening to you, Deon.
Hey, g'day, how are you?
I'm very good, but not so good for the Cathedral of the Blessed Sacrament for the Catholic faith. It's the end of the line for the cathedral.
Yeah, the announcement's just been made. Obviously, the work that they've been doing for quite some time to try and see if they can save it, it just hasn't worked. So they've made the announcement tonight, and it's goodbye to the Catholic Cathedral. And I think it's quite sad, but this is a step forward. Now there's some certainty around it, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what the church does next and where they will rebuild the cathedral.
It is correct that have the council as well as the faith community already invested probably several $millions in dollars into trying to investigate how this building could have been saved?
Yeah, look, there's been a lot of money put into trying to work out how they can save it. But the reality is, just to save the nave, which is that middle part, $91 million, and that's not even a full restoration. So really, it gets to a point where everybody has to go. Where do we sit with this? And unfortunately, it's a massive job. It's such a beautiful building. It's going to be sad to see it go, but we have to respect that the church has made this call, and that's the call that they're going to go with.
Okay, thanks, Dion. Right, now to the main business of the call this evening. The global settlement between the council and the government has been announced. Could you take us through the main points, please? And we'll start off with the anchor projects that will be transferred to council.
So obviously, yeah, we've got the anchor projects now. We've got the bus exchange. There's the Margaret Mayhew playground. There's the Avon River precinct. And those are some of the major things that are going to be transferred as assets in the major projects that are coming to council. And there's also the Metro Sports facility as well, which is going to be delivered by Otakaro. Within all those things, there's a whole lot of other bits and pieces that we need to take into account. So there's some maintenance issues within the bus exchange, and the Crown have said, yep, we're going to fix those. We're taking over. We're paying for some of the Avon River precinct as a city, and already most of the Margaret Mayhew playground has been vested into council. So it's really tidying up those things and getting those back into council ownership.
What does that mean for the council in terms of liability and insurance and what have you?
So once the council takes all these things on, that's the city's responsibility for all of the maintenance and everything that happens moving forward. Obviously, the buildings and all of the civil constructions, they have warranty periods. So most of the civil construction, let's say Margaret Mayhew playground and a lot of the work that's on the promenade, a lot of that work will have 10-year warranties. So the companies who have built that will have a warranty for 10 years. If there's defects from the work that they've done, they will have to come back and fix that. Just like, for example, the roof and the air conditioning on the bus exchange, that's not working at the moment. Well, the air conditioning is not working, and the roof has some installation issues, and they're fixing those before it gets transferred to council. But whatever is fixed will have warranties as well. But the other thing is, once this does transfer to the council, then we, as a council or as a city, have to pay ourselves rates as well. So we lose a little bit of rates income in this process as well.
Now, you mentioned the Avon River precinct there. So all the groundwork and the planting and all that regenerative work that was that all done by the Crown?
Yes, so the bulk of that was done. It was about $110 million worth of work that goes from the hospital right through to Fitzgerald Ave. And there's some work still to go, still to happen between Barbados Street and Fitzgerald Ave. And I think from what I think it was about $9.6 million that the council's transferring to take over that asset. So it's a lot of work, a lot of money has gone into it, and the council's only put in a smallish amount in compared to what the Crown did. But look at the result of what we've got. Actually, it's, in my opinion, it's probably one of the most amazing transformations that the city has had. The city's moving away from Cathedral Square being that civic space, and we've got the entire river promenade as that civic space. And moving into the future, I'm really looking forward to seeing how that whole space gets activated.
You mentioned insurance earlier. Have we learned from the last, big problem that we had? Are we now sufficiently insured?
Yeah, so the city council is insured for about $1.5 billion of its above ground assets. And anytime we get an asset that comes into our portfolio or into the city's portfolio, that gets added to the list. So there's a massive schedule of all of the buildings. There's heaps of them. And I'm only talking about the above ground assets here. They all get added to the asset register, and if anything happens, they get then tagged to this pool of insurance. But there is a lot of work that we're doing, and we're constantly assessing what would be the best way to make sure that the city is insured for any sort of damages, shock, catastrophe or anything, so that nothing is going to happen like what happened before, because it's just not good enough.
It's becoming increasingly difficult to get insurance in some cases. Is it almost coming to the stage where we may have to look to the government to become insurer again and resurrect the idea of state insurance?
I mean, that may well be a possibility, especially with sea level rise and climate change and coastal adaptation and a lot of those things. There might be a place where the state needs to step in. But there is still a lot of global insurance out in the market. And Leanne and Raf were over in London meeting with some of the reinsurers. And the whole model of insurance and the risk-based or the passing of risk to a body that's not who owns the asset, and how much that costs. It's all changing. And I think the international markets are looking at New Zealand and going, you know what, we've got good balance sheets here in Christchurch, and New Zealand isn't a huge risk compared to some of the other countries and other places in the world that they do insure. So I don't think we're going to lose insurance. It might change, but we are working, and the Mayor and a lot of our staff are working very closely with the reinsurers and all the other insurers to make sure that Christchurch is forefront and will have insurance into the future.
I'm speaking with Councillor Deon Swiggs, and our main topic of conversation this evening is the global settlement between council and the government. Now, the convention centre is not included in this.
No, it's not. And we were very, very much, this is a $500 million asset, and there's a huge amount of ongoing operational costs involved in the convention centre, and this is not something that we as a council were keen to take on. So the conversation when we were looking at the global settlement was, okay, so what's in, what's out? And for us, a bottom line was always the convention centre is out, because you've got to think about the ongoing maintenance costs, the operational costs, the rates, and potential midlife upgrades as well. So as soon as we take it over, we've then got to pay all of those things as a city. And we all know convention centres don't make money. And so this is us saying to the Crown, you wanted this here, you wanted it of this size, you're building it, now you can keep it.
Can you levy rates against the convention centre?
Yes. So there will be, once the convention centre is built, there will be a rates income coming to the city as well.
Rather than the liability of running it?
Effectively, yep.
Oh, that's a win-win there. Right then, land that is to transfer to the city, the residential red zone, flatland. Now, let's have a talk about this, because there's quite a big opportunity here.
Yeah, absolutely, and this is actually probably, in my opinion, the opportunity in the whole global settlement. A lot of these anchor projects were defined through the cost-share agreement, but one of the big pieces of work was that residential red zone, and it's the flatland residential red zone lands that we're talking about specifically here. That's the Avon or Te Akaro city to sea connection. Massive opportunity, 600 plus hectares of land that's been it's so sensitive. These were communities, people that lived here. They were bought out by the Crown through it was a voluntary offer, but we all, let's not relitigate that. But we're taking that on. So the Crown is now giving us that. There's only the value of the land is very, very low. So from a rates point of view, we're not really, it's not really any difference for the city. There is an operational cost here with taking on this, and it's about $3 to $4 million to maintain that land through mowing and doing other things per year. But what I'm really excited to sort of look at the opportunity here is actually within the transitional use, the transitional governance of the residential red zone, which is a specific part in the cost share agreement. And this is where I'm really hopeful that we can actually enable communities through the wind up of Regenerate Christchurch to actually start taking on the governance, being funded appropriately, and looking at ways that we can actually utilise that land so it gives a return to the city and not actually cost the city as well. And I just think there's so much amazing stuff that we can do, and we're already seeing some of that. Richmond Community Gardens, the Avon Takaro Network, they're all doing amazing stuff in the space, and I really want to see that continue.
And very briefly, you mentioned Regenerate Christchurch and it's being wound up. How much did we spend on Regenerate Christchurch? Have you any idea?
So we were budgeting for the last 3 years or 2 years. We were budgeting $4 million every year, but this year we've wound that right down to $1 million. Now, we did want to sort of say, do we need it? The Crown wants to keep Regenerate Christchurch, and there is a function there for Regenerate Christchurch. There's a really powerful act that that basically statutes Regenerate Christchurch that has some really good stuff that can make sure Christchurch gets some of the things that we need in this earthquake recovery space. There is a small function there, but from a point of view from the council, we're only paying $1 million a year to Regenerate Christchurch to operate, down from the $4 million that we were funding. And over the next couple of years, they'll transition, and most of that function will probably come back into Christchurch City Council, which means that eventually we won't be paying anything to that organisation.
Now, there have been some things left out that people may want to be included. What about residential housing in the central city?
Yeah, this was something that wasn't necessarily looked at. Wasn't really wanting to be looked at by the Crown, because it's just Takaro have given a contract to Fletchers to deliver the houses in the East Frame, which is now called One Central. There was some discussions around, do we want to break up some of those super lots and allow other organisations or other businesses and developers to come in and actually start really sparking up some of the development in there. But there was no real desire from the Crown, unfortunately. So this is one that wasn't opened and relitigated. It's just a contract that the Crown have through their company, Takaro, and unfortunately we do not have any influence over Takaro, so it is basically staying the way it is. And Fletchers will be delivering those houses over the next 5 years, I suppose.
It does seem to me that it's not an unreasonable assumption that if you want to live in the central city, most central cities in the world, you've got to be pretty well off. And it looks to me as if, unless you can afford $500,000, you're not even going to get a 2-bedroomed flat or unit in these new builds.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we as a city need to grapple with. It's not separate to the East Frame and what Fletchers are doing, but it's as a whole city land use planning. The way central cities work, it's a symptom across any of the cities across the country and most other cities around the world. It's in developed countries. Central cities seem to price out the people that you really want to get into central cities. So yes, I mean, there is some work there that needs to be done. We've got a separate piece of work through Project 8011 at the council that does look at that. So it's not really part of the global settlement, but housing in the central city, we've got that land. We do need to crack on and do that. And over the next 3 years, I really hope we start to get some headwind over that.
Councillor Deon Swiggs, thank you so much for joining us this evening and talking about some of the issues arising out of the global settlement. We take it as read that you'll be running again for council.
Yes, absolutely. I've got at least one more term left in me. There's some work that needs to be done. Central City Action Plan really needs to bolt out the gates, and I'm really excited for what the future of Christchurch holds.
Okay, well, there's plenty more to talk about between now and the election, so hopefully we'll get you back onto the programme.
To talk about.
And,
Not a problem.
Okay, thank you very much, Deon Swiggs. Good night to you.
Take care. See you later.
Good night.